Thank you for inviting me. It's very excited to be here. Just want to give you a big context before my colleagues will move into the different case in Indonesia, Myanmar, Cambodia, and Singapore. So just want to talk about the theoretical context of what is so-called the Asian modernity. So the beginning is this. In 2000s, year 2000s, the beginning of the 21st centuries, a group of us, among friends, gather in Canton and enjoying a very nice Chinese dinner in the Chinese round table. So we have a lot of food on the table. Some doesn't like it, some like it, so we don't care about the food, and we're just chatting about the problem with our architectural educations and the perspectives, how we look into architecture. And most of us are lamenting that the use of this book by Banister Fletcher is become like poison for us. Well, look at the content, you see that tree of architecture is not like our tree of life or Kalpataru in India. Or if you're familiar with the Javanese culture, it's not like the Gunungan. But it's based on assumptions that all these so-called the historical styles is all Egyptian, West Asiatic architecture, Greek, Roman, early Christians, Gothic, Renaissance, modern architecture in England, architecture of the British dominions, and architecture in the United States of America. And this is the non-historical styles, which is Indian architecture, Chinese architecture, Japanese architecture, ancient American architecture, Saracenic architecture in Arabia, Syria, Egypt, Spain, Persia, Turkey, India, and that's it. You see all these three architectures. It's very offensive, but, well, we are helpless because this book is used by most of the architecture schools in the region, even in Asia, to teach history of architecture. So we say, well, we cannot just say, remove this book. But we have to come up with an alternatives. So what is the alternatives? Well, we start to look around, do some comprehensive inventories in different cities. And this the beginning is 2001. So we start exploring different cities, working with students, with different universities, among the Asian schools. And we found some interesting case. For example, like this, the Japanese colonial government general headquarters in Seoul in 1928. It's been demolished now after the 50th anniversary of the end of the Second World War because of the very nationalistic reasons. But that buildings, basically, is called, this is all modern buildings. So for Japan, modernism starts from even before Meiji. And even if they copy all these forms, or even in Thailand, the throne hall of Rama V, which look like Gothic buildings, but actually for us, it's modern buildings. And then look into this house in Medan, Indonesia, built in 1950s. I don't know whether it's a vernacular, whether it's Art Deco, it's whatever, it's just a mix of everything. Back to 1930, there is a Dutch architect, Mac Pont, who designed these buildings, look like a vernacular building. But actually, if you look into the structure, it's a very modern structure based on the mathematical calculations. And Belager went to Bandung at that time, and he praised this building and said, wow, this is very revolutionary. Why? Because it's apply a principle of the inverse Gothic principles. So it's not very heavy stone to sustain the structure, but it's just very light laminated wood structure with a wide span building, but the shape, the form is traditional and is naturally ventilated and is very local. So Henry Mac Pont returned to Holland and he touched in Delft and he started to patent the books and his mathematical calculations. And one young chap from Germany called Frey Otto went to Delft and found this book, and he developed the tensile structure based on his calculations. So if you're talking about modernism and modernity, it's not one-way directions. It could be two-way dialogue. Without Maclean-Pond, who studied the temples reliefs in Java and get inspired by bamboo's architecture and develop this mathematical calculation and come up with this form of modern buildings of Asia, we don't have the Munson's Olympic Stadium roof and the tensile structure. So we start to think, well, maybe we should start to do something and look around. Bruno Taut went in Kyoto and stayed in Japan in between 1933 and 1936. And he's so amazed with the Katsura Palace in Kyoto. And he learned about Zen. He learned about the simple principles of simplicity, order, geometry, functionalism, even the so-called the ergonomics, the tatami principles and so on. He even designed some buildings in Japan. But the most important thing is Bruno Taut is also an influential figure in Germany during the New Sachlichkeit period. And the thought of that people in Germany also helped to shape what is so-called the Bauhaus ideas, whatever. So it's cross-fertilizations of different thought. When I was a young architecture student in Asia, this is our Bible, New World Architects Data. And of course, New World came from Bauhaus. Although later we realized, well, it's very dangerous if we use these standards, means we have to submit ourselves to DIN, the German industrial standard, which is another neo-colonialist way of bringing the industry. And it's not compatible with GIS, Japan Industrial System, or the American, the so-called the imperial system of the America claim themselves as a democratic nations, but only British use the metric, not America. So there is a lot of ideological issues, even in the so-called the standard, even when we use the template, because it's related to something else, the economy and so on. So you start to realize, well, historical learning, theory, history, is very important. It's really want to make us independent in terms of thought, in terms of teaching and architecture, not just from Banister Fletcher, but also to give a critical thinking to our Asian students so we can produce knowledge. It's not consume knowledge all the way. And how to turn the knowledge productions back to our hand so we can stand together in the same levels with our colleagues in the West. That is the thing that we in 2001 start to use later. If you look at these two pictures on the left and your right, this is Singapore and Berlin. Well, this is the Southern Housing Estate, and the other one is Tiong Bahru SIT, Singapore Infrastructure Housing Estate. And on the left is the Sitlung in Berlin, on your right is SIT Block in Singapore. Well, it's nothing to do with Bauhaus, but yes, there's a lot of similarities between the West. When I walk around the Daniel Lipskin building yesterday, and I found some fragments of the IBA projects, it's very nice Sitlung. It was built in the 70s or 80s. So there is some universality here, universal principles. There is neither East or West. Is the same. So we start to reflect in Macau, the first meeting in 2001. I just quote some of the very important points of these Macau declarations, talking about the Asian modernisms and modernities in plural, and modernism in small m. Because we don't want to use modernism with big M, Eurocentric, iconic modernism. But we want to talk about humble modernisms, shop houses, marketplace, ordinary modernism with small m's, which is more like modernities, but it's not just one single modernity, but modernities. So we start with this statement. Today in Macau, because the conference was in Macau, and we are sponsored by Macau government because they want to list Macau to UNESCO at that time, so they fed us very well. They need support from these foreigners to, well, but we don't care, we just enjoy the food. And we produce these declarations in the heart of Mediterranean of Asia. So we use this term Mediterranean of Asia. It's just a very hybrid place. We affirm Asia as a dynamic source of our identities. It's from us. And recognize the numerous experiences that we share with the rest of the world. So it's layered modernism. Industrialization, urbanization, westernization, colonization, decolonization, and nation building. This phenomena has variously defined Asian modernism. It's not just from single thought, not just about the Enlightenment. It's not just about the geometry. Modern Asia has not developed in a vacuum, just like what Banister Fletcher said, but has evolved through sustained interactions with the West. So it's not an anti-West discourse, which has a constant presence in our collective consciousness. And this shared experience of the world unites us as Asian. The history of dealing with the West, boy, we fight very long independence war. With our neighbors, we also fight each other. And with ourselves, the struggle about our own identity is manifested in the myriad forms of our architecture. The history of modern architecture in Asia is the history of how Asians has become modern. I think this statement is a defining moment for us. That we start to look around the regions, walking around and, well, creating a lot of discourses, conferences, seminars. So modern architecture in Asia testifies to the creativity of our past generations. So we respect tradition, and is the vital foundation of our future. Conserving these irreplaceable modern buildings and landscapes will ensure that they continue to have a meaningful presence in our everyday lives. So it's a justification of the need of conservations, and the conservation is about modern buildings, and this modern building is referring to all of that. So we organized several conferences, Macau 2001, to make a declarations, went to Singapore 2002, and then went to Surabaya 2003, when we invited Maristela Casiato, the president of the Docomomo International, to be the keynote speaker. And she gave a very strong address about the fish, the standard of docomomo, that this should be called Asian architecture. And then we confronted her, saying that our modernity is not like that. If you want us to use your fish, not a single building in Asia can be considered as modern buildings, according to docomomo principles. So since then, Shanghai, Istanbul, Tokyo, New Delhi, Maristela follows us, and Docomomo International actually converted. I mean, they accept the declarations, and they organize several conferences, like in Ankara, I think, in Turkey, about modernisms, and we do a joint publications, the Docomomo International Journals in 2003, and the theme is Southeast Asian Modernisms by Docomomo International. And then we went to Delhi, Singapore, Bhopal, and Seoul 2011, and we make a declarations of industrial heritage. And then, well, there is some gaps in between. We start the so-called the mASEANa. Well, same, small m, but now we also want to talk with small a. It sounds more modern, ASEAN architecture. The term ASEAN itself is very interesting because it's not invented by us. It's because of the Cold War. It's because you have NATO in Europe. So America created SEATO in Southeast Asia against the domino theories. When there is a Cold War in America, the hot war was fought in Asia. So actually the term Cold War doesn't apply to us. All the destruction, demolitions, and all this fighting, the death is happening in Asia. But never mind. So we invented the term Southeast Asia. Right? It's a military, political terminology. And we set up the so-called ASEAN, Association of Southeast Asian Nations. And there are three pillars of ASEAN. One is the economic cooperations. Second is the security, because we hate military, but it's security. And the third is cultural. But after many, many years, only the two pillars can stand, which is cultural, economic and security, but not culture. It's still working in progress. So that's why the mASEANa actually is trying to address this issue of the third pillar of ASEAN. It doesn't work. And ASEAN Heritage Association is still working in progress. So it's a collaborations of different NGOs with a strong lobby to the central government in each country. And we are trying to insert one declaration that AHA should become the partner of ASEAN governments during the revolving Asian leadership meeting every year. So we can inform the governments of each country about the bottom-up, about the community-based, about the voices from the ground. So the government can change or tweak the policies for conservations. And why we are doing so behind the closed door during the ministerial meetings? Because losing face is very bad in Singapore, in Asia. So if you want to change something, do it in the restaurant in the morning having dim sum. You don't go to the street and fight them. They will kill you. And nothing will happen. Don't shame the government. Talk to them nicely. Having tea, having coffee, playing golf, and then you can get the result. So that is the strategy. So we do a soft approach on this. So this is what happened in the last 5 years. The project will end next year. So we start with the first conference in Tokyo, and then Hanoi, and then Tokyo, and Jakarta, Tokyo, Bangkok, Tokyo. Why Tokyo, Tokyo, Tokyo? Because the money is coming from Japan Foundations. Why? Because Japan is very eager to spend a lot of money, because 2020 is Tokyo Olympic, because Abe is want to compete with China and Korea, with AIIB, with all this one belt, one road things. So, well, they are very generous. And we say, well, we are not harmful because it's talking about culture. And Japan is very eager to go back to Southeast Asia to compete with China. And, so we are just use the money and then we support this project. So the first series, 2016, we are talking about pioneers of modern Asian architecture. And we told our Cambodian counterpart, no more one, only one. We want to hear about others. Because it's not just, Cambodia is not just about one, only one. Indonesia is not just about Silaban. Or where. So we try to push this discourse beyond the so-called the known discourse into the wilderness. Wilderness means, well, history is moving forward. It's not stuck in the past. And it's layered. I still have some sentiment with Chinese temples, with colonial churches, but not the millennial generations. They don't care about that. They don't have historical baggage on that. But they have more relationship with shopping mall, with market, with primary schools, with clinics, hospitals. So that's why they need to embrace that and try to justify the narrative why this should be preserved or should be demolished. It's up to them, not to us. So the second meeting was in 2017. The theme of that year is modern living in Southeast Asia. It was in Jakarta. It's very interesting because the conference was organized by Chung and it's in the Istiqlal Mosque. So all the participants have to remove the shoes and the girls have to wear proper clothing and so on. 2018 was in, where is it? It's in Bangkok. It's about materiality, technology, and modern movement in Southeast Asia. 2019 will be in Singapore. We are addressing the so-called developers because we want to get the money to rejuvenate the so-called the modern buildings. So the title will be Progressive Once More, Rejuvenating Mid-Century Modern Architecture in Southeast Asia. And again, Docomomo International has been publishing this modern Southeast Asia special editions. Not special, it's normal edition number 57 last year. So this is the product of mASEANa project. If you look into this link, just click that link. It's university because we cannot afford to pay for server. You just click and you can download all the PDF for free. That is the principles, right? The open informations. So this is the structure. We need to do the regenerations. We need to pass the baton to the younger generations. So that's why we created these reverse pyramid models for the networks and organizations. The so-called the country coordinators are those young people, Brian, Chung, all these friends. This is under 40. No, it's not biological age. This is mental age. Intellectual age has to be 40 or below. And then we have supporters at the bottom, which is MAN, e-commerce 20th century commissions, Docomomo International, even Getty Conservation Institute. Everybody welcome, come on board, but they cannot impose the agenda. They cannot impose their methodology. Japan Foundation, Toyota Foundation, local funding, whatever, Chinese money, Japanese money, Korean money, you are welcome. But they cannot impose the agenda. So we put ourselves, Sinuramatsu, Yoshiki Yamana, and myself as a servant to filter those money and to channel this to the young chaps over there. So after this project, this become a launching pad, and this launching pad should produce a new discourse called the theories of Asian architecture that will replace Banister Fletcher book forever. Because it's their hand that the new discourse and the new knowledge about modernity should be propagated, right? And the principle is regenerations, equality, and openness, which is very important. So this is my last slide. It's taken from the MAN Istanbul Declaration 2005. Memory is a prerequisite for all thinking. Knowing our past gives us confidence and momentum, and the stability to engage with the challenges of the future, including global warming, including the 20th, the UNDP Sustainable Development Agenda, and so on. Revitalization of the modern built environment demands the resurrections of lost craft and techniques, and the preservation of an irrecoverable native knowledge that has passed away with every generation. Committed engagement with the fertile field of modern Asian architecture addresses the vital needs of shelter, identity, and beauty for the growing population of Asia. So we admitted all these issues. In an urban century, contemplating of metropolitan future, we promote and practice the revitalization of aging heritage through the infusions of creative capitals. So I think with this, I will end my presentations, and then you'll be able to hear yourself from the colleagues, from the younger generations, from the Southeast Asian country, what is going on in their own countries. Okay, so during the break, please cut the number of your slides to no more than 15. Thank you.